And now here's part 2 of our episode.
So why is this a standout track for you?
One, I think just the fast pace of it, just really talking about, I mean, whether it's 130 or 155, this song is, that train is shooting down the track.
Yeah. Right.
I think also what's interesting to me about it is, I think both musically, but then also symbolically, because I think one of the things that became interesting to me about that particular track is that even though it was, if I remember correctly, it was released in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And this is before we had gotten into war, really, truly, with Iraq. But then it became sort of the anthem of the war, which is fascinating considering they're both anti-war.
Yes,
very notably. Yeah.
Gee, has that ever happened before? Someone
Exactly.
co-opting music for the wrong reasons?
Right.
But I think, but it's interesting because I think part of what made it, rightfully or wrongfully, a really interesting anthem for war is just like how fast paced it was. Like you're listening to this thing and you're like, I am just being assaulted in a good way, but I'm being assaulted by by this tempo, by this rhythm, and just like even the rap. And like what's interesting to me about it is like you can hear them. In some ways, I wouldn't say struggle, but you can hear them. They are working hard to keep up with the own pace of the song that they have created.
Yeah.
And so
it implies like a sort of like I think Michael, you're right about them bursting at the seams in this too, but like just the maximalism in general of everything that they do, that feels like something that really differentiates them from the kind of East Coast West Coast dichotomy that we're talking about.
Right.
Like obviously, I know that there's a lot of like any properly East Coast and properly West Coast rappers want to like stuff as much meaning and like heft into what they're doing as they can, but there almost feels like it almost feels like exponential with the stuff that Outkast is able to do. I guess I wonder how you place Outkast in the context of that East-West debate, like that,
Understood.
like how you understand that.
I mean, in some ways, I think that the thing that was fascinating to me about Outkast generally is that they were in some ways bucking all of that. They're like, we are here to just make some music and talk about the things we want to talk about. And so it was almost like they were completely like, we're actually interested in making the Dirty South part of this conversation, as opposed to being per se in conversation. They're like, let us bring the Dirty South and what the Dirty South has to bring to the table in terms of funk and in terms of rap to the table. So they just changed the conversation.
Yeah.
I think it became a lot less about East Coast, West Coast. And then I think they actually broadened the conversation to just rap and hip hop.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think I hear a lot of talk about Outkast being commercially accessible, for audiences, and I think the subtext of that is like for white audiences, right? And so, do we think that them stepping outside of that kind of East Coast West Coast kind of thing that was happening in the 90s, do you think that's something that contributed to them being more quote unquote accessible, or like how does that strike you? Not that I'm asking you, listen, you're talking to two white guys in California. Let's just also put that right out there too.
On behalf of the Black delegation.
And you're not a monolith, but that's, I guess I wonder how you understand that.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think what it is that and this is, and being that I was young in the 90s, we're not going to talk about how young, because like I said, I love
we're not asking
some mystery around how old I am, even though I gave away a lot earlier. But I do think what was happening was that I think there was a lot of association with East Coast, West Coast rap with violence.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in some ways them entering the scene in the way that they did in the 90s. And I think that's also part of the reason why like there was a little bit of like, it took a while for their careers to kind of really take off. I think people just weren't taking the South as seriously as they should have been in terms, which became hilarious to me considering that eventually Atlanta became like the hub of where rap, like if you didn't make it in Atlanta, you were just not going to be the next rapper.
And it set the model up for like this kind of regionalized hip hop that we see today, which I think is really exciting.
Right. But I think to truly sort of answer your question, I think what was happening is that they just like broke up the idea of the violence associated with rap and gangster rap at the time, and really just sort of inserted a new conversation about like, can we get back, like in some ways, can we get back to not about like warring territories. Can we get into a conversation about like what are the things that are important to like the country at the moment? Because that's the thing. They were very outspoken in some ways through their lyrics about what they were seeing in the world around them. Like, I mean, there were some really, like when you think about Rosa Parks, even though this is like previous to Stankonia, but they were really having interesting conversations. And even, you know, Bombs Over Baghdad, when you really get into it, they're talking about two very distinct things in that simultaneously. They're talking about just like rap in general and sort of the shift that is happening in rap, and also talking about like conflict and violence and war.
Yeah. I mean, let's also consider that the album cover also features them in front of like a completely black and white flag. Right. So they're not creating this music in a vacuum.
Yeah, and this is like a trend, I think, especially for Andre. I think we should get into like the differences between Big Boi and Andre and what they present and what they offer in this. But like in preparation for this, I was re-listening to one of our favorite albums that we've talked about on the pod, which is Frank Ocean's Blonde from a few years ago. And Andre shows up on solo reprise, and it's a lot of lamenting a bit of the state of hip hop and where it gets to. But they've been doing this, which I think maybe getting a little bit meta about it has really allowed them to given them license to make music. Getting a little bit meta about what hip hop is and what it should do has given them license to do some really interesting stuff.
Agreed.
But so, okay, I know that I said in the intro about like they're sort of moving away from the misogyny of hip hop culture, but also there's a song on this album called "We Love These Hoes."
Oh, exactly.
So we do in fact love these hoes. On this pod, I want it to be known.
It's different than what came before, but also, I mean, like there's that, and also, I mean, there's a song called, you know, "I'll Call Before I Come."
Right.
I mean, I don't know. Like
the message of that one is super solid, though.
Exactly.
It's
very respectful.
Like, I mean, I feel like I'm sort of pushing back on my own intro a little bit in that respect, because I'm sort of like, you know, yes, they're moving away, but also like
it's still there.
It's still there. I mean, they're still horny boys who have some problems. So, you know.
And it's interesting because I think, you know, especially when you think about what was happening in their lives at those exact moments, you know, it's, I mean, probably one of the biggest sort of followings, intentionally or unintentionally, was like Andre 3000 and Erykah Badu's relationship.
Yeah,
she's on this album.
Yes,
I think they'd split, right?
Yeah, I think so. Somewhere like either right, but they had to have split because of Miss Jackson. Although I think they were both talking about their like, But then also that's the thing. Like you have these. It's fascinating. We're just going to leave it there.
They contain multitudes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Well, I do think this touches on an important, like an interesting distinction when we're talking about the content of hip hop, like lyrically, when we're talking about sexuality and violence, right? And how what we're speaking about, like "I'll Call Before I Come" and "We Love These Hoes," these are things that are very sexual, but they manage to speak in sexually explicit terms, you know, sexually specific terms, I guess you might say, ratcheting back the violence that may have been included with that sexuality on another kind of album, which I think is, you know, probably there were other artists doing that at the time, but they do it in such an approachable way. I wonder what makes them so approachable. As I guess I find them approachable, but like I wonder what makes their energy so approachable, even relative to the other people in the dirty South scene that they were in.
Well, I think some of it's also just the contrast, because I mean you have those songs, but then you also have what is it, Spaghetti Junction and Gasoline Dreams.
I love that song.
Right?
I love that song.
I think that's also some of it. It wasn't like it's an entire album full of like talking terribly about women or like, you know what I mean? But you can also sort of in some ways see like, okay, women are part of their world and of their environment, and also there are other things that they want to talk about. So, you know, it's all just part of the soup of putting together an album.
What a soup it is.
Exactly.
Quite a soup.
Can we also talk about some of these interludes? Like,
yes,
please. Let's. I mean,
it's theatrical. So like,
it's very theatrical.
Yeah.
Is it Kim and Cookie? Is that the one? That one's my favorite. That one is my favorite.
I think, you know, back to what is this, like that moment when I was in undergrad, like I think people started coming in during I'm Cool because you're just like, what?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And even just the intro, like, I think the intro back to one, just like the hearkening of Afrofuturism, but then also just sort of setting the tone for what this thing was going to be. Because like it is very clear. Oh, wait a minute, something different is happening here. Like the sort of futuristic beep boop of like
we love a beep boop here.
Beep boop moment. and then just talking about bounce. And that, I mean, I'm sort of conjuring some of the words that I think about when I think about that intro. But then also Kim and Cookie is hilarious because you're just like, where'd they find them? Like, there's just a lot going on in those intros. And I think what makes it even more interesting is that you also get the humor in the two of them as well, which I think is also a different contrast to like the gangster rap of like the 90s. Yeah. Like this, you can tell that they take their work seriously, but not necessarily themselves.
Yeah.
Yes. That's a good way of putting it.
It's a different take on it because I mean, interludes are, I feel like, a part of most hip hop albums that we've covered, but it's not doing the same thing that like Wu-Tang was doing, like at all.
Nope. You're just like, who are these characters? Because that's really actually the thing. Back to you saying that it's theatrical. Like you're like, who are these characters making appearances in between these songs? Like I would love to just see all of them.
I want to see the Kim and Cookie show.
Right.
I want to see that show so bad.
Exactly.
And the way it's underscored musically, the way it's like it's not just an out and out sketch, but there's like these musical kind of sonic elements that really add to it.
Right.
It gives you it gives you all the colors on the palette that they're working with, even in something as seemingly simple as a sketch on the album.
Which then gets you into, when you think about Speaker Box and The Love Below, like, okay, now we know exactly where those interludes started.
Yeah, totally.
Because those interludes are just wild. Because I remember when Speaker Box and Love Below came out, I think I was in grad school by then, which, oh God, now I need to check that date on that because I feel really, really, really old if that's the case. Okay, so
we're not doing any math over here.
Exactly.
Don't worry.
No, I think I was in grad school at that point, and I just remember we sat down, and I can't remember the name of that interlude, but the where are my panties?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just remember my friends and I was in grad school because I was sitting in a place, like 5 of us had rented a house, and we were like in the same thing. We were just like, let's get all of them together, and we're just gonna sit and listen to this. And we got to Where Are My Panties, and we were all like, you know what? We all just need to go grab a bottle of wine and come back.
Yeah, it warrants that. It warrants that kind of immersion.
Exactly.
I think. Okay. Martine, we asked you to nominate 4 albums that you believed were "quote unquote" perfect.
Yes.
And I just want to stress, dear listeners, that she also chose a Radiohead album, so we love her very much.
We do.
Continue, Tyler. Sorry.
It's just we'll heap on the accolades to all of your opinions and all of your choices. But we didn't define that term "perfect" for you, nor would we. Right. That would be dramaturgically and pedagogically unsound.
Yes.
So. Tell us a little bit more about what standards you were using to assess the albums that you nominated to us. What were your standards for perfection?
I think with all of the albums that I submitted to you, it was a turning point in careers. And part of the reason why I say, and so I think in some ways the way I'm defining perfect is more about when do I feel like an artist truly came into their own?
Oh, I like that.
Okay.
I like that.
I don't think anyone's ever said that. Like, that's new.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it's really about when do you know that they are not necessarily, I mean, like even when we were talking about, like the sort of 3 sort of standout singles that came from Stankonia, it was also very clear that the rest of Stankonia was for them.
Yeah.
And like you could, and like I said, you could really hear, not even, I don't want to say warring in the sense that they are battling, but you could just definitely feel where Big Boy and Andre were starting to diverge. And the fact that they decided to embrace that instead of fight it,
Yeah.
That's why I said I was not surprised by Speaker Box and Love Below, was not surprised by, what came next. Not surprised that, like I said, that Andre is out there with flutes, in these streets with the flutes.
And we've talked about New Blue Sun, or I've talked about how much I've been listening to it a lot over the last however many months. And I do think it's some of the most exciting. I don't know. Maybe this is crazy, but I just find it to be a very exciting album. I listen to a lot of it. And
dramaturgically, I have to admit that some of what cracks me up is when you have these moments that contrast of, the very first track, which is like, I think, what is it called? I Swear I Meant to Write a Rap Album, with this very calming, flouted instrumental.
Yeah. Well, I love this thing you're saying about a turning point, because we'll say we spoke earlier. The Radiohead album that you nominated was one that we haven't spoken about yet, Kid A, and I like thinking about Kid A as a turning point album for Radiohead as well. Kind of the turn into the next part of their career where they had maybe different priorities, or maybe their the freedom with which they express themselves. They became more themselves. I like this thing about coming into their own.
Right.
What do you think it is about this collaboration between Big Boy and Andre that wasn't like explosively conflicting? Like, how do you think that it remains so positive?
I think it's because and this is back to coming into their own. I think it's because they figured out, they started to really experiment with how could these two things actually marry and be great, as opposed to trying to figure out how to bury it.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes what happens especially when you think about bands that eventually break up because they're just having sort of musical differences of opinions, like what would happen, like what would the Beatles have sounded like if they'd figured out how to deal with like Yoko and her shenanigans?
Right.
Maybe that might be the thing you should strike. I'm not kidding. I actually said what I said.
Yeah. I was gonna say we didn't say it, Joe.
We're keeping it. We're keeping it,
but we're not the ones who said it. Martine said that, not us. Okay.
What would have happened?
I said what I said. Yeah. But you kind of you start to wonder what would have happened with some of these bands if they had actually tried to embrace some of that difference and figure out how to make that somehow make it work. And I know that some of it is just like, I think it was almost an amazingly impossible set of circumstances that they are trying to marry, while also they figured it out. And like, part of me is like, bravo.
Yeah.
Bravo.
I like this thing that you said about the three singles from the album, right? Which are B.O.B., So Fresh, So Clean, and Miss Jackson. They really are some of Outkast's most famous songs, right? But interestingly, they're not. I mean, Hey Ya's a thing unto itself, right? Hey Ya is a monstrosity, monstrosity of a phenomenon, right? But it's amazing how those albums kind of transcend, or those songs actually kind of transcend the album in terms of their popular power. But then I love this thing that you're talking about, it being the rest of it being for them. That they're able to kind of do both, get you one who can do both, right? Like they can write the songs that are huge pop kind of like powerhouses, and then intertwine that with something else that feels like it contributes to it bumps those things up and is utterly genuine without kind of feeling like extraneous,
right?
And I think it's not filler,
right? And I think especially when you listen to the whole album in its entirety, like even though those songs sound so different from the other songs on the album, somehow they've managed to put that in a track list that actually flows.
Yeah.
Which is also really interesting. And, in some ways, I think they're using those interludes to their advantage in terms of making it flow. Yeah. But also, how brilliant is that?
I think it's brilliant also because all of those songs come in the first half of the album.
Right.
And I think people probably quit sometimes before they get to the second half of the album. And it's a very gratifying back half of the album.
Agreed.
Underrated.
Oh, I do have a question for you too.
Oh, please.
Ready?
Please, yeah.
Taking those three off the table, what is your favorite song after that?
Okay, we're looking at the. I said mine already. Gasoline Dreams.
Yeah,
Gasoline Dreams. It's a great album. I love a good album opener, and like coming off of the weird intro and then it goes into Gasoline. It's just like. I'm adding that to like my workout mix essentially.
Yeah, totally. If I had taking the three singles out, I probably it's tough. I like Slum Beautiful. I think it's a really great song. Unfortunately featuring CeeLo. You know,
right.
How you feel about CeeLo. Let's just call that out right there.
Like, for those who cannot see my face, it's cringe face. Cringe emoji.
It's cringe face for all of us. And go do your Googling if you can't remember about all that. But
exactly.
Don't love CeeLo. Great song though. I think probably I'd put Slum Beautiful, but I think We Love These Hoes is
right.
Because I do love these hoes. Is the issue. Yes.
You know, well, and does it make it less terrible because it's spelled DEEZHOEZ? So like they could be talking about anything, right?
Right.
You know, and there's some great sequencing in there because then you go into Humble Mumble with Erica, and I do love
that's a great song.
That's a great song.
Yeah, it's pretty good too.
So there's a lot of hidden quality on this album that gets overshadowed, and I like the idea of that contributing to its perfection.
Right.
Dear listeners, you might have noticed I haven't kept a dang point down because we're moving beyond that.
Trying something different.
We exist in the context of all in which we live and what came before us. So you should know that we're not doing points properly anymore, but we're still assessing the job that Martine did. Making the case for this album's perfection, right, Michael?
We sure are. And so what we're going to do, dear listeners, is at the end of each conversation, we're going to sort of share our one or two key points that our guest made that we think are just sort of contributing to our decision.
Yeah.
You know, this is, I mean, the suspense is building.
Yeah. So we're officially moving into deliberation phase. Yeah. Done. Yeah.
Put
in the Law and Order sound. Yeah. Something. Yeah.
No, I'm sure that one's trademarked or something.
It's gotta be.
Not that one.
Yeah.
So
yes, I think Martine, thank you for speaking so effusively about this. Like this is just the energy we want for an album like this. I think Martine's done an amazing job talking about the particular power of this album in the context of the overall sweep of who these people are, kind of like where it's led them. I like the idea that this is. I'm gonna point back to this point about them coming into their own on this album because it really is those first few records, they kind of moved back and forth between styles. They were sampling a lot of things, but through that, I think they're very clearly finding their voice with Stankonia in a way that would kind of explode with the next album, and then lead them to everything that they are today. What are you remembering that was particularly strong for you?
I mean, the thing I'm remembering, I must admit, is a much more sort of personal attachment, which is this description of you just always playing music in your college dorm room and just like having the door open. That's how you met people. I mean, I met some of my best friends in the world in college were met because of our shared interest in music. And so like, I wish I had met you in college. Like, I just think
we would have hung out.
Yeah.
We would have hung out for sure.
And the fact that like people just show, like you closed your eyes and a little creepy. People just like shut up when you open your eyes, but like also kind of cool that's what.
Can I give you an interesting side note about that?
Yes, of course.
Back to my dorm room being the place where all kinds of random stuff would happen. I remember one day. So the other thing that my room was good for, besides music, was also sometimes watching movies.
Oh, great.
So like I had a Netflix account when it was like just starting to be a thing that you had a Netflix account, and so like
DVDs.
Exactly. Yeah. Like I forget what movie it was, but like I was like asking everyone in the hall like, what should we watch next? I don't even remember what it was, but I remember distinctly everyone had gathered in my room. I probably had at least 20 people in my room, which sounds like a bad fire hazard. Yeah. And some people were like, there were like 5 people on this futon that we had on the floor, and all I remember is someone in a bear costume ran in, like humped the leg of the person that was like closest to the door on the futon and then ran out. But here's actually the best part of the story.
Oh my God.
This happened. Everyone stopped and looked. And then everyone went back.
See, that's resilient. That's resilient. You know what I put that down to? I put that down to your hosting ability.
There we go.
You created a space in which this bear was not going to ruin the night.
Exactly.
Exit.
Exactly.
Nobody pursued the bear.
Exactly. No. Exit stage left.
Don't pursue the bear. Let the bear go. You don't need that. My God.
Well, Tyler, what do we say? We haven't, because we used to do this thing where you would like set it up and then you leave the decision on me, which was never fair.
It's never fair. I think we're gonna have to trade off probably. Okay. But you can put it to me for the first time ever.
I will. I mean, I'm gonna say yes. I think this can join the pantheon, but Tyler.
Yeah.
It's up to you.
Okay.
My redheaded. I don't like doing this part.
I was always pretty good at this
do
part. Yeah, this is why I did it.
I'm saying yes, Tyler. What do you say?
I think there can be no doubt, Martine, that Outkast's Stankonia goes all the way to 11. That it's a perfect album. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you.
This was such a gratifying re-listen. This was kind of like very, very interesting because you can go down any number of pathways with where Outkast's influence is now. Because now I'm listening to some Killer Mike, Obviously, there's Janelle, who would kind of come into their own like Afrofuturist vision that is for the teens. Maybe if this is the Afrofuturist vision for the early aughts, this Janelle took that baton and carried it to the place that they have now. And we're very pro Janelle as well. So yeah, this is an excellent choice. And thank you so much for doing this.
Chef's kiss.
Martine, what a pleasure it's been to meet you. I'm glad this was the way we were able to do this.
Same.
We were able to have the queen of TTS here. Any plugs, any shout outs?
I would say the one shout out besides, support your local theater organization always, and theater educational organization is if you have not listened to this album in its entirety, please do so. Just sit down, get your favorite bevy, and then just have a blast.
That's honestly what we hope everybody walks away from every episode doing is raring to listen to what album we have dove into. But okay, that's the shout out, guys. You gotta you gotta subscribe, you gotta do all that stuff. Michael and I haven't been doing that. We haven't been asking you to do that, but go ahead and do it if you don't mind. It matters.
Follow us on YouTube as well, because you never know. Sometime there might be actual videos coming up from us soon. You don't know. Who knows?
And we have a TikTok now. We're gonna try it out. We're just gonna see we're gonna throw some shit at the wall, and we're gonna see how it works.
Ready for the cringe fest, y'all.
Please make sure that some of the whatever your content is on this TikTok includes like you doing viral TikTok dances to this song.
It's gonna have to happen.
I'm gonna reveal something. The last time that we were in the same place together, I really wanted to create we recorded a Robin episode, and I really wanted like Tyler to learn the dance for Dancing on My Own. Is Dancing on My Own? I think that's it's from the video. The one that Karen Killam did on SNL at one time.
Yeah.
But we didn't. We were busy.
We could go back. Content never ends.
Anyway, all right.
It might happen. We're so happy to be back. Season 7, baby. Recording in person. Martine, we love you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And we'll see y'all soon. Bye.